Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear participants. Welcome to this session of self-improvement to the Quran series. This is the 15th session, and the passage that we're going to study today is from Surah Zaryat, which is the 51st surah. Just going to share my screen with you and read out the text and translation. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Innal muttaqina fi jannatin wa uyun, akhizina ma atahum rabbuhum. إنهم كانوا قبل ذلك محسنين كانوا قليلا من الليل ما يهجعون وبالأسحار هم يستغفرون وفي أموالهم حق للسائل والمحروم. However, the righteous on that day will be among orchards and springs, receiving what has been bestowed on them by their Lord. Before this, they were thorough in their deeds. They would sleep very little at night, and its final hours would seek forgiveness from their Lord. And in their wealth was a share for those who ask and for the deprived. So these verses of Surah Zaryat, as you can see, depict the reward of the righteous in the hereafter. And as we have been explaining all along, that the reward of the righteous, which has been depicted in the hereafter, is mentioned in many verses and many passages of the Quran, and each has its own distinctive feature. But one of the things which always stands out is that the paradise which is depicted in the Quran is something which was very, very cherished or held very cherishable by the Arabs. To them, orchards and streams, and orchards especially on high grounds below which fountains would flow, would have a special charm. And for this very reason, the picture of paradise which has been presented in the Quran is something which is very familiar and something which is very revered by the people of Arabia. This also shows that this mention in the Quran of paradise has a very specific connotation and something of a very localized connotation as well, because the Quran, the foremost addressees of the Quran were the Arabs, and for them something had to be mentioned which they really liked. So on a very similar pattern, the Quran has extended these favors and these gifts that would be given to them, the people of paradise, by telling us at various occasions that we will get whatever we desire. And this sentence occurs in the Quran at numerous places to emphasize the fact that yes, the picture of paradise that is being now presented before you is something for the foremost addressees, because this is something that they like so much. However, of course, there are people who would be living in later generations in other parts of the world for whom cherishable items would change and they would be different. So because the foremost addressees of the Quran were the Arabs and the people of the Book of Arabia, of course, so a lot of things which have been presented in the Quran in this context had to appeal to them as well. But because of the universality of the Quran as well, in its message at least, we find that this sentence tells us that yes, for the rest of mankind, whatever they cherish, whatever they like, whatever they would prefer would be given to them. And this singular statement, my dear viewers, is something that is, I mean, we just cannot gauge the depth of this statement. I mean, imagine someone telling you that you can get whatever you want, all your wishes would be granted. And not just one wish, not just 2, 3, 5, 100 or 1,000, but every single wish on every single instance, all the rest of eternity that you would desire would be there for you. I mean, this is something that we at the moment even we just cannot fathom. But such is the profound nature of reward which the Almighty has promised us. So at times we do get stuck in some of the portraits of paradise that have been conveyed in the Quran, but we should remember that these portraits are for the Arabs and to make them feel that this is what they cherish and this is what they'll get in the hereafter. But not everyone might cherish what these Arabs did cherish, so therefore for them it is said that they'll get whatever they want, anything, without any distinction in this regard. And the reason for that would be that they have earned this reward. It's not that, of course, God's own blessings would abound, but in the first place, people would have earned this reward. And that is why it is said that akhizina ma atahum rabbuhum, that they would be receiving what has been bestowed on them by their Lord. So it's something which God would be given them, but they would receive something because they have earned it. And at other instances in the Quran, it is said, "Innama tujzauna ma kuntum ta'malun," that this is the reward of what you had been doing in the past. So basically, paradise and its gifts would be a reward for what we have done in this world, or what we would be doing in this world, whether in circumstances that might be conducive and whether in circumstances that might be difficult. But in both cases, this is how we would be treated in the hereafter. So, a couple of things which have been mentioned for such people. First of all, they have been called muhsin. Innahum kanu qabla zalika muhsinin. So these people of paradise, these companions, these dwellers of paradise, they have been called muhsinin, which means that they are the righteous. They are the ones who befittingly did everything in this world, which actually points to the fact that whatever they did in a befitting way. They did it in a way that was optimum. So if they were people who were righteous, if there were people who were truthful, if there were people who were kind, sincere, this was done to its optimum extent. So innahum kanu qabla zalika muhsinin, and kanu qalilan min al-layli ma yahja'un, that they would be ones who would sleep but little at night. وَبِالْ أَسْحَارِهُمْ يَسْتَغْفِرُونَ, and during the early hours of dawn, they would seek forgiveness from their Lord. This is a feature, dear viewers, you would have gauged. It has been mentioned in so many places in the Quran that believers are those who would spend their nights fearing the Almighty, getting up in the prayer, standing in prayer, talking to Him in prayer, and calling upon Him in hope and in fear. تَتَجَافَى جُنُوبُهُمْ عَنِ الْمَضَاجِعِ يَدْعُونَ رَبَّهُمْ خَوْفًا وَطَمَعًا. At another instance, it is said that they would sleep but little and they would pray to God. يَدْعُونَ رَبَّهُمْ خَوْفًا وَطَمَعًا. They would pray in hope and in fear. Hopes for the best and fear that we might not displease our Lord and earn His wrath. So this is something which believers would do continuously. And we also know from the Quran that as far as the night prayer is concerned, it was incumbent upon the Prophet. So it was mandatory upon him. It was like 6 prayers being offered by him as an obligation. But for the rest of the believers, we know it was the night prayer was an optional prayer. But the Sahaba, the companions, and all righteous people since after them, they have continuously offered this prayer in a very diligent way, because this is the prayer which amongst all optional prayers, amongst all voluntary prayers, occupies the highest status. And we know from the Quran that this is the time which is of special importance. It is a blessed time, and there are narratives which tell us that this is the time in which the Almighty focuses His attention the most towards His people. And if they ask, He says that I am there for you to answer. And the reason is, of course, that in a normal setting in which people sleep at night at the proper time and they get up in the morning, waking up for the tahajjud prayer is a real effort that you have to undertake. Of course, the times that we are living in, people are awake at the time of tahajjud. A lot of people are awake, but if we make this, if we pass through our natural routines, that we sleep at the right time and get up in the morning at the right time, then obviously at the tahajjud time, people would generally be sleeping. So to get up at that time, to make a special effort to go and make ablutions and then, of course, stand up in prayer is absolutely not easy. So this is something that requires a lot of effort, because the time that you would like to get up for tahajjud is a time which is the sweetest for us to sleep. And so it's difficult to break our sleep and get up at that time. So to make an effort at that time, to get up at that time, once it is done, we'll find that our mind and heart are in they're synchronized. And it is as if the words flow from our mind and heart, and these words flow with tremendous sincerity. And the Almighty also is going to listen to us, of course, according to His own laws and wisdom. But this is the most blessed of times. And believers themselves, they should try their best. And these days in the month of Ramadan, it's so very possible, because when we get up for our suhoor, when we have our sihri, we have the time to offer the tahajjud prayer, and we offer it, we can offer it as much as we can. The Prophet used to offer it in odd numbers, and the maximum rakat that he offered were 11 in odd numbers. But of course, because For us, it is an optional prayer. Any number of odd rakats from 3 onwards is something that can be done, and it is something that can really earn the blessings of this month as well. And then it is said, وَفِي أَمْوَالِهِمْ حَقٌّ لِلسَّائِلِ وَالْمَحْرُومِ. And in their wealth was a share for those who ask and for the deprived. So another thing which is mentioned here is that besides offering the night prayer, besides being diligent in the night prayer, one of the things which is a trait of these people is that they always look after other people. It's not all that they're always thinking about themselves. They are always thinking about others as well. In fact, there is a fixed share in their wealth for other people. And referring here to zakat, which of course tells us that this being a Meccan surah, that it was a sunnah of prophets of God, and it was a pre-existing sunnah. So it's not just a sunnah which was initiated by Prophet Muhammad himself. It is an age-old sunnah. It was, much before Prophet Abraham, and we'll find references in the Quran, in the Old Testament, and about the Old Testament and the New Testament, that all previous prophets, just as they enjoined the prayer, they also enjoined zakah, and we also find the percentages of zakat to be exactly the same as the ones that we have, that we know today. So the Quran tells us that these were the people in whose wealth was a fixed share for those who ask and for the deprived, and as a result, they would never shirk the responsibility towards the society that they live in. And at other instances in the Quran is mentioned that over and above the mandatory amount, which is zakat, they would also spend in charity in a very generous way. And this is one of the hallmarks of believers which is mentioned. And a couple of things which is mentioned regarding this charitable behavior. First of all, it is said that they spend what is the most dearest to them. They give it away, and they are the ones who would like to earn God's love by sacrificing what they like the most for the cause of God. At another instance, it is said that believers are the highest rank that you can get, in fact, in charitable behavior, is that you spend for others even if you yourself are in need. And the Quran has actually praised such believers by saying, وَيُؤْثِرُونَ عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ وَلَوْ كَانَ بِهِمْ خَصَاصَةٌ, that they would give preference to other people in spite of being in need themselves. So I think this is something that we have to draw a lesson from. And in particular, in this blessed month of Ramadan, we know that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ himself would become more generous than ever. He was already a generous person, but in the month of Ramadan, his generosity would increase. And he would be, as the hadith say, that he would be like a wind who would blow past other people as if he is always looking for their welfare. So to be on the lookout for other people, to be always tuned to the needs of other people is something that we have to do. And one obligation that we must offer for the month of Ramadan, which is also called Zakatul Fitr, is that we have to pay this amount before the Eid prayer. And this is a day's meal that we consume, or its equivalence in currency that we should give. And every person living in different standards has different standards of eating. But one meal, the extent of one meal that we consume, of course, we have an afternoon meal, we have an evening meal, we have breakfast. So the consumption in an entire day, if you convert that into currency, that is the Zakatul Fitr, which is imposed on every person. And it is precisely for this reason that it is called Zakatul Fitr, that it is a form of zakat. So zakat is something which is mandatory upon us, and one of the important things that we must realize while paying zakat is that we should try to calculate it in an accurate way. So many a time we just make it a rough estimation and we think that we are fulfilling our obligation, but I think it is very important to realize that at times we might be missing the exact calculation. So it's always wise to go through that calculation and pay zakat the way it has been imposed upon us. So this brings us to an end to this session, to this passage. Inshallah, we'll be talking about a new passage tomorrow, but for the moment, you can ask any question that might come to your mind.
Thank you, Dr. Shehzad, for a valuable talk today. The first question that I have with me is Dr. Sabah. Sabah, please go ahead.
Thank you for the talk. I wanted to ask about the zakat on the gold jewelry, which is owned by women. because I heard that the things that you're using you're not supposed to give zakat on them, but most of the time we keep our gold jewelry in the bank. So if you're not using it, how are you going to decide about that zakat?
So you see, zakat on jewelry is only on that jewelry which is meant for the purpose of investment. You have just bought it, for example, you have bought bricks of gold or any such item which is meant for investment. That is zakatable. Otherwise, jewelry which is kept in the bank or maybe in a locker or with you, and maybe you use it sparingly, or maybe you don't use it at all, or very, very sparingly, there is no zakat on such jewelry. I mean, zakat on jewelry is always on that jewelry which is meant for investment purposes, which means that you are actually going to, I mean, you're not going to use it, and the purpose of keeping it is that you would sell it once the prices would get higher.
Thank you. Naveed Irfan, you may ask your question now.
नक्सब भी जैसा आपने बताया ज़कात कैलकुलेशन के साथ करें, अगर हम एक रफ एस्टिमेट ले लें और उस पे थोड़ा सा बढ़ा करके कर लें, मतलब बिल्कुल प्रॉपर एस्टिमेशन नहीं कर रहे हैं, और अगर थोड़ा सा बढ़ा करके कर लें तो किया जा सकता है क्या? मतलब एक रफली किया है और उससे थोड़ा बढ़ा लिया है ताकि एहतियातन, तो वो बेहतर है क्या? बिल्कुल या
still suggest that I think we should do it exactly that. Why should we do a rough calculation? Because remember, zakat is an act of worship also. So, I mean, you just don't do it in a rough way or in a way which you estimate things. You calculate zakat. So it's always advisable that you calculate it to the exact penny so that you know what you're spending. At times, if you know that you're spending and you still have a lot more, you might get inspired to spend more. And at times when you calculate, you think that you are already giving a lot, you'll get to know that you are actually giving your due. So it's like a spiritual thing as well. Remember, it's not just dispersing money. It's like an estimation that you have about what you are doing. And this gives you spiritual benefit. That spiritual benefit is only obtained once you know what you are doing. So, I mean, yes, roughly calculating and then giving maybe 10% higher, I guess would be okay, but then I would say it's not the optimum way or the recommended way. The recommended way is to receive spiritual benefits from this act of worship, and that can only be done once you are absolutely sure that this is the amount that I'm giving.
जी, इसमें गोल्ड के उसमें हमें डाउट पैदा हो जाता है ना कि गोल्ड की एग्जैक्ट कीमत उस वक्त नहीं निकाल पाते हैं, तो ये एक मसला हो जाता है कैश में तो
So, I mean, you see, what you can do is, as I said, that this is always an estimation that you do. You ask from the goldsmiths that you ask them what the price is, and when you make a rough estimation of that price, it is on the basis of the data that they have provided you. So you can make an average from the data that you get from 2 or 3 goldsmiths. You can ask the rate, how gold is being sold at a particular price, and you can just take an average of that price.
जो हमने गोल्ड लिया है उसमें मेकिंग चार्ज भी रहते हैं, तो हमारे पास जितना गोल्ड है, मान लीजिए 5 तोला है या 4 तोला है, तो उसको हम तोला में कन्वर्ट करें और जो एग्जैक्ट प्राइस है गोल्ड की उसके ऊपर ही लें कि जो मेकिंग लगा है.
I mean, the selling price of the gold, because you see, one is the market price and one is the selling price. I mean, what price is the price of that gold in which you can sell that? Because I mean, it's always different from the asking price.
Thank you. Nashaba Wasim, you may ask your question now.
Assalamu alaikum. So I don't know how to ask that question. Like if we want to do more for God, so fear work more or love work more? Like why Allah Ta'ala say, if the people who fear to me work this. So
you see, our relationship with the Almighty is a mixture of both of these things, love and fear, because you just imagine your relationship with your own parents. So just to understand your relationship with God, it is always good to come to this world and see how we behave with our own parents. We love them and we also fear them. When we love them for what they have done for us. When we fear them, we fear them because we might displease them. I mean, we might make them angry, and their anger is not for their personal sake. It's because we would be doing something that's going to harm ourselves. So loving God and fearing God is also to be taken in the same respect, that when you love God, you love Him for what He has done for you and for the favors that He has bestowed on you. And when you fear God, the purpose is that you fear that He might become angry with you, and His anger is not a personal thing. It's something which is going to, I mean, if He's angry, it's because we are doing something which is going to harm our own selves. So you see, it's basically God's love and anger in between these two emotions that we should remain. It's not just love, it's not just fear. In fact, the word fear is better than to use the word anger. And when I say fear, as I said, is something that you have something that you would lose, and you would lose the grace of the Almighty. You would lose the pleasure of the Almighty, His like, and His liking, as I said, is something which is always for our own benefit. So always think that this is something which is very close to what we do with our parents. We love them and we fear them as well. And our fear is not the fear of someone, who is terrible or is horrible. It's not out of horror that we fear that person, but out of the love that we might lose that love, we have that fear. So remember, love also always comes first, and fear is the fear of losing that love.
Yes, thank you. Baran Nashur, you may ask your question now.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My question was actually about the qadr that's bestowed upon us, because we all know that we have our free will and that we can make our own choices and we can make mistakes. But God also has His own plan for us, and God makes no mistakes, and God's plan is perfect. So how does this relate to our own actions? Are our actions part of God's plan, or is it, I don't know, something else? I don't know how to quite phrase it.
You see, God has given us the freedom to choose. At times we don't have that choice. For example, He has not given us the choice for the parents that we have or the country that we are born in. Similarly, the age that He would be giving us. So there are certain choices that He has made for Himself, for us. And in those choices, He's not going to hold us accountable. But then there are other issues in which He has given us total freedom. For example, to do good and evil, to do bad things, to do good things. So God says that as far as His qadr is concerned, His qadr doesn't mean that He's governing our actions. He has given us freedom to do whatever we would like to do. The only thing is that He has knowledge of our actions. So the word qadr should not be understood to mean that He has destined something, or He has made it something which we are bound to follow. No. What is actually the case is that we do everything out of our own choice, but whatever choice we adopt is in the foreknowledge of God. So foreknowledge should not be confused as if He is driving us to do something. So our freedom is independent and His knowledge is independent. So He knows what we are going to choose, but He's not going to influence us.
Okay, but how would it work with, for example, praying istikhara to make a certain decision, for guidance in a certain decision? Because in the end, we have to make the decision on our own, but we trust God to help us make the correct decision.
See, istikhara is just a prayer. It's just an invocation, a supplication, or a dua. That's all. It's like all other duas. There's nothing different about it. So when we pray to God, three outcomes could be possible. One of them, that the prayer is accepted. The other is that it could be deferred. And the third is that it's just going to be stored up as a reward for you. This is what the Prophet has told us. So the case of istikhara is no different. Either your prayer would be answered and something will come along. It may be something in your mind, maybe something in the situation in which you are able to take a decision, or you'll not get any answer at all. It will be just deferred maybe. And the third thing is that this will be stored up for you as a reward in the hereafter. So there is this confusion about istikhara as if it's like a hot line between ourselves and God. This is not true. The word istikhara means to ask good from the Almighty. And it is generally at the crossroads that this dua is invoked, which means that we have done all our own due. We have exhausted our own intellect, our own experience, and we are still not being able to decide amongst 2 or 3 options that are available to us. So we then put up our hands before God and say, God, whichever of these options is good for us, please make it destined for us. Just like a prayer. So don't think that istikhara is something that is going to give you an absolute result. So just as other invocations and duas can go unanswered, same is the case with istikhara also.
Thank you, Dr. Shehzad. I have a couple of written questions. First question asks, they would like to know, if Jesus is not coming back to this world, who will take care of Dajjal al-Masih?
You see, Al-Masih al-Dajjal is someone about whom we are told that he is someone who will be a false Christ, and that is why he's called Antichrist as well. And who is going to take care of the false Masih or the false Christ is something that is yet to be seen. But certainly it's not Jesus, because he's not coming back. There's no evidence of him coming back either in the Quran. In fact, the Quran is of the opposite. It's not only does not mention his arrival, whatever it mentions goes against the fact that he's going to come. And as far as the authentic narratives are concerned, they also present an entirely different picture. So I think that you have to understand that as far as the Antichrist is concerned, whatever is going to happen to him is yet to be seen, but certainly it's not going to be Christ who's going to tackle him.
I believe this must have answered that question. There's another question about zakat. While paying zakat to a needy or a deserving relative or a friend, is it mandatory to declare and inform the receiver that it is zakat being given to them? If yes, will it not challenge their self-respect?
We don't have to do that. I mean, it's not an obligation at all to disclose that we are giving zakat. However, if the person is insisting on asking, I mean, then we don't have any choice. But people generally don't do so. So it's not our obligation to take the initiative and start telling people that this is zakat money that we are giving you. I mean, it's not an obligation at all.
All right, thank you. Ruhi Rasul, you may ask your question now.
My question is on the second part of ayat number 16, which says, Innahum kanu qabla zalika muhsinin, that they were, even before that, they were among the people who were good doers. So, qabla zalika, even before, that means that before they became muttaqeen and they were given the jannatin and all the good things which are related to the
actually, no, this refers to the previous world. Qabla zalika doesn't mean that before being righteous. It means qabla, before, yes, before coming to this hereafter. In the previous world, they were muhsinin. So qabla zalika means that before entering paradise, in the previous world, they were muhsinin. So this is referring to the previous world, to the world that we are now living in. So remember, this is the portrait of paradise, as if we are now entering paradise. So it is said that these people who are now entering paradise,
the world that they were
it's about the previous world, which means the world that we are living in now.
Thank you. Bisma Tirmizi, you may ask your question now.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Saleem. My question to you is that, you know, in a non-Muslim country, say people built a mosque, you know, and there was a small population of Muslims at the time, say 40, 50 years ago. As the city grew, more Muslims came in, and the mosque is now in an area which is not considered, you know, it's in a decrepit area. So is it possible to sell that mosque and then finance a bigger mosque in a nicer area, or would that be wrong?
Yes. No, it's perfectly all right. It's like you are reconstructing that mosque at another place. It's perfectly all right. I mean, you always expand mosques. You change the venue of that mosque. You have that right. It's not that it's now become so sacred that you just cannot raise it down.
It can be, right? So because when I brought it up, it was shot down, the idea, because the area is not, you know, very desirable. So just wanted to know if there's no ahkam or anything mentioned in the Quran or nothing like that, right?
Nothing like that. It's entirely the choice of people. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much. Appreciate that answer.
Thank you. Sabah, you may ask your question now, and this is going to be the last question for the day.
Thank you. I'm going to make it short. This is again related with the jewelry. I just still have some confusion because when my parents gave me jewelry, they said I was not interested in taking that jewelry, but they said it's going to be an it's going to be an asset for you. So from what I understood from what you told me is that it's if you intend to use something as an investment. So I'm a bit confused. Of course, I don't plan to use my jewelry in the near future. But when we make this jewelry on weddings, I think at the back of their mind, they do have this thing that, okay, our daughter can use this money if she needs it. So I'm not sure where to put it. Shall I put it in something I can invest or not? If you can put some light on that.
I mean, I think, you see, you have to ask this question to your own self. So once your parents have given you the jewelry, now it belongs to you. I mean, you can use it, whether sparingly or constantly wearing it, or you can just put it away in the bank, thinking that you might pass it on to your own daughter or your daughter-in-law, etc. But if the question is that you've just saved it up so that you could, I mean, you're going to sell it later on, so that, I mean, you can have a good return as the gold prices increase. That particular jewelry is zakatable. And another thing that I might suggest here is that, for example, that you kept this jewelry for personal use, and let's say 10 or 20 years down the road, you thought that you'd now sell it and use it as an investment. If that is the case, then what you can do is that you can pay the zakat for the previous 10 or 15 years by an estimate, estimating it because it was left as an investment and you never thought it would be an investment, but it ultimately ended up as an investment, that you can retrospectively pay zakat on that. I mean, this is a way out, so that if you're still in a predicament and you're not absolutely sure that whether it's for investment purposes or it's for personal purposes, you can just keep it. And if it remains for personal purposes, I mean, you don't have to do anything. But if ultimately it ends up as for the purpose of investment, then you can pay zakat retrospectively as well.
Thanks a lot. This is very new to me, but very relieving. Can you tell me where we can read more about it, the proper way to give zakat?
Well, there are a couple of lectures that I have given. Maybe our organizers here would let you know some of the links that you can go through.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'll be sharing the links soon. Thank you, Dr. Shehzad, for a very section talk today. Thank you. We'll see each other tomorrow.
Okay. Inshallah.